My name is Karsten. I'm a software architect at Systematic, the big company here in Aarhus of 450 people approximately. And I'm here to talk about how we try to introduce some of our innovation methodologies into our culture in a sense. So what I'm going to talk about is I promised you the story, so I have laid out the slideshow in a story. Why? So I'll talk about, first I'll have some small talk about why we're doing innovation in the start. That's going to be very philosophical and theoretical. I hope you will stay awake, please. And then I'll talk about how we did Idea 1 or planned Idea 1, our innovation day 1, and what takeaways we had. And then we'll talk about the second idea, which is a kind of iterative way we have been doing things. And before I will be talking about the next innovation day we are planning very shortly, I will just make a sidetrack to something we call customer-driven innovation. Customer-driven innovation is kind of a misnomer, but we'll get back to that. So here for the first. One thing that I very often get asked when I talk about innovation is, what's the difference between the creativity and innovation? And in my optics, creativity is thinking about new things. And innovation is taking these new things and turn them into practical things. Just to be sure about that. Then the question is, why innovation? And I'll draw a parallel to some of the philosophical work and discussions there's been in New York Times about contingents. Contingent is really a very old thing, or a very old thought thing. It's about Aristotle said that when you have a contingent, you're standing in a position and you have a lot of different options to take, and you cannot select which option you want to take, and you cannot see the consequences of your selection. So you'll have to take a selection. However, it's not chaotic. You could think that when you have here, you cannot see which of your possibilities is a good possibility, and what the consequences of selecting one possibility is undetermined, that you have chaos. But that's not the case, because when you look back on all the steps you took, you see a logical path. So when you see what you have been doing, what choices you have done in retrospective, you have a logical path, but it does not help you when you look forward. Now, how does that relate to the software world? It relates in a sense, I have this picture of having calm waters. You have this area of calm waters where you as a company are working at the moment. And all around these calm waters, you have rough waters that is rippling, and you cannot, when you walk up there, you cannot make these steps. You have the contingents out in the rough waters, but in the calm waters where you are at the moment, you have determinism. You have the Platonic worldview where you can extrapolate on measured data for the next step. And as far as you are in the calm waters area, you can use classical project management and tools for predicting how is your velocity, how far can we go in a specific step, and what would happen. When you get out in the rough waters, you cannot do that anymore. What happens in the modern world is, as we have more globalization, the chance that some company in India goes in and disrupts your core business, your calm water space, and turns it into rough waters increases. So the net effect when you have globalization is increasing, the areas of calm water is decreasing. Hence, we need some kind of tool to navigate into the rough waters, as opposed to what we used to in the calm waters. And in systematic, we believe that one option in this case is innovation or innovation techniques to investigate the rough waters. So how does that chain into CMMI 5? When you get to CMMI level 3, it's all about predicting where you are and where you're going based on existing data and processes. So the view is that you put in measured data into your processes and you have a predictable outcome. That works when you are in your calm waters, when you do not have contingents. When you get to level 5, you get to a level where you have self-optimization. And we have seen that we have some projects that hit our contingents, our border of calm waters, and we cannot predict what happens. So we have determined that we want to do something about changing our way of thinking to be able to handle these situations. Hence, we have tried to introduce the innovation. So what happened was that our CEO asked a small group of people to try to do some innovation days where the whole company was collected and into workshops, and we worked with some ideas to find new products and to learn the process. And because we wanted to try a lot of things, mostly because we wanted to see what worked and didn't work, we created 3 tracks. The first track was to have captured the people in the organization, in the company, who had ideas ready-made. A lot of people had ideas they wanted to introduce and talk about and post somewhere. So we created a blog for them. And they posted ideas there, and people could discuss these ideas. And then on the day, they would go into a team which would do iterations and work with the idea and finalize it. And what we asked the people to do was to create a sales pitch and a presentation of what they did on the innovation day at the end of the day to capture a specific output. Part of that presentation was a business canvas, and I will get back to that, what that exactly is. We also had a second track where we wanted to capture people that wanted to participate in the innovation, but did not have an initial idea. They just signed up, say, I want to participate. So we created a track 2 for them, and they had the same thing. They entered a day of where they worked and ideated on the idea they were assigned to, and they produced an output in the form of a sales pitch and a business canvas and a presentation. Finally, in the company, we had some experience with people who created some very, very useful tools, more or less in their free time. So we wanted to give these people who had a very specific idea to do some improvement in the company, to have the possibility of using the innovation day to create this tool and then present it afterwards to the project manager or the project leader And they had to ask the project leader beforehand whether it was all right to do that. So this was the basic design we created for the first Innovation Day. Just about 14 days before we had our first Innovation Day, we had a course for facilitation. It was not a facilitation for innovation, but it was a general course on facilitation. And we took and asked the people who participated in this course to participate as facilitators on the teams that worked. And likewise, we also asked the top management to be venture capitalists. And we did that in order to have some people the team could ask, is this a good idea? How should we modify this to have relevance for the company? So they were on mobile call and could come in and evaluate the idea presented to them in the raw form. So the team could have feedback on what to improve and not improve on the idea. At the same time, we pulled out these people from the general ideation and workshops because vice presidents and the CEO they have this very large ego, and they would fill a workshop and dominate it if they were inside. So we, in a sense, controlled and used that big ego in a constructive way. So what happened? And one thing we learned from the first Innovation Day was that our ideation phase did not work. People posted ideas. However, they did not. There was no discussion. We did not have a culture of discussion about ideas. So basically, people posted idea, people looked at it and didn't know what to do about it. They were very reluctant to say, hey, I think that part of the idea is good. If we change it like this, then maybe it's better. There was a very strong sense of ownership. Not from the ones who posted it, but from the ones who read the idea, and hence a reluctance to discuss it. And also we had a problem that we could not get any funds for people really discussing this. So they had to do it in the lunch break and so on, and that of course does not help. Then the facilitation. That was a good idea. Pure luck, but a very, very good idea. You need to have a facilitation in a group like that, or they just get stuck. That was a very clear outcome of our first Innovation Day. If you do a workshop, you need a facilitator, and it should be a trained facilitator. And they should have a very good toolbox, and we had the luck to have the game storming book for our course, and that was one I can recommend. Use that one. It has a very nice set of tools for opening and closing game storming ideas and working with the group. The business canvas was another, not as much a stroke of luck, but a very nice stroke of luck. Sorry, didn't make sense. The business canvas is basically a very simple way of looking at a business case, where you have various fields for the customer, for the channels, sales channels, and how you licensing or whatever income channel you have on an idea or a product. When you do this kind of workshops with the kind of people we are, very technical people, we typically have a very, very good and very nice solution. But we have not thought about how are we going to sell it, and we may even not have thought about who's the real customer. So that's a very good thing. And we have not thought about what is the value proposition. What is the thing we are really trying to solve. So if you have a tool like this in the workshop, when you're working and you're putting up posters, you can see suddenly you have this bare area that says, hey, we do not know how to ship this to the customers. Let's work on that. That I can really recommend. So we had some clear takeaways from the first I-Day about what we want, what worked and didn't work. And we started planning on the second I-Day. And one of the first things we did, we are Agile, we did a retrospective of the first I-Day. And one thing that turned out very quickly in this retrospective was that our CEO who initiated this did not have product invention in his mindset. That was not what he really wanted to do. He was really focusing, and his focus was on changing the organization. Taking the organization from this very process-centric CMMI company to having more innovation and more, I would say agile, but it's not just agile in the sense we've been talking about today, but in a way of producing innovative solutions to our problems. And we had been focusing on the product innovation. That gave us a problem because the assumption was that there was a clear consumer of the ideas from I-Day 1. And it turned out that was not the case. So we had 4 ideas which were selected as being good, but we did not have anybody to act on them. That's not good because people have really worked with them and they should feel that their ideas are appreciated. So what we did for the second I-Day was that we should also focus on the organizational change. And we did that by keeping the product innovation, but de-emphasizing it somewhat, and then emphasizing the learning of the organizational innovation, or the learning of the processes. As I said, we learned facilitation was important. So we created an additional course on top of the basic facilitation that was geared directly for innovative facilitation. And we created a process. Now, a process in this case is kind of counterintuitive because if you put processes on top of innovation, innovation stops. But we created a process which was a kind of a bottom level catch-all for everybody. So our facilitators could use that as a reference model and then build on top of it as the day progressed. We also learned one thing that was important from the day is that it's important that the facilitator is assigned to one team and one team only. Because the teams had the feeling that they needed to onboard a new facilitator all the time because they were rotating. We thought that letting people rotate was a good idea, but it was not. You needed to have this personal interaction, and the facilitator needed the personal feeling on how the team was working during the facilitation. And we also created a startup meeting with the facilitator and the team, so they could meet for just half an hour a week before and shortly introduce themselves, get to each other to know each other, and briefly discuss what they were going to work on, and identify if there was some missing information they really needed before they could start working on an idea. So, Idea 2, we created only 2 tracks. The third track about the personal innovation, where the people was writing some idea for the company, did not work. Maybe because people were too ambitious, they had not thought about how little amount of work you were able to do in a day. So that one was out. What we asked to do was, we asked the vice presidents to create challenges, because we also found out that we needed to make a smaller amount of ideas, or do not have so broad a scope for the ideas, that is. So we asked the vice president to create what we call challenges, was the company faces this and this problem. Could you please come up with solutions or think about new things in these areas? Then we created 5 challenges, as you see up there, and we asked people to sign up. On one of the tracks, they could sign up directly for the idea and do innovation on the day, or ideation, or think about innovation on the day. And we created another track which we called the entrepreneur track, because we really wanted to catch those people in the organization that has the drive to run with an idea and push it through the organization. We wanted to help these guys, let them learn how to do things. And we created a number of gates. They should be able to have a team around them, and the idea should be within the challenges, and then they could work on it on the day. So this was the basic setup we made. Unfortunately, the ideation did not work for the entrepreneur track. Again, this pre-ideation phase did not work. This time it was because we got the challenges too short before the day, so there was no time. So we didn't really have the ability to try the ideation. So we ended up with just one track, the track where people assigned to challenges and then went to the day and did ideation, which worked quite well, actually. So, some outputs that we learned from the second iteration day, apart from the change. One thing I don't stress here is really that because people have been in this process a lot of times, or 2 times now, they start to learn and accept the facilitation as a toolbox for creative thinking, which is actually the organizational change we wanted. But what we learned here is that if you want to do things like this, you really, really need management. It's not enough that the CEO say, go fix. Because if the upper layer of your management is not involved, then nothing happens anyway, regardless. We also learned a funny thing that we hadn't thought about, because we still had our venture capitalists. But we could see here second time when we need real sponsors. Having sponsors by proxies as the venture capitalists do not work. We need the real customers if we want this to work. The real users. You can also say the real product owners. And the challenges we did get was very rudimentary. They need to be really worked out. We need to do some workshops to create these challenges to a sufficient level. Or we should not do it like that. We will have to find out something else. I'll just jump a bit to a side track which came out of Innovation Day 2, and it kind of addresses this thing about customers. And now I'll try. If we look at the product backlog today, when you do agile development, at least in systematic, we are very efficient of taking an existing backlog and execute it to software. But as Russell Miles talked about, how do we ensure that we're actually building the correct software? How do we ensure that we have the correct thing in the backlog? If you talk, Dan North had this picture about a seed. You put in a seed, and when you put in this seed he talked about, and you put it into the backlog, and it grows, and your software incremental grows and grows and grows, which is nice. But the problem is that if you put an apple seed into the product backlog, what you get out is an apple tree, or a dead apple tree, in some say, if you don't put enough water, or you can let it grow and you can have apples to apple pie. But it is an apple in some sense. It's apple. So if the customer comes to say, no, it's not apples, it's not apples, it's not apple wood, it's not apple pie, we will like something with peaches, we have a problem. Because what we really have here is stop the line on big scale, because it's not just a sprint, this is the whole development we're talking about. And if you do that, you better have your arguments in place. So what we talked about, what we thought about was, hey, and we had some success, at least two cases of a success. One where we have taken out and say, stop the line, and talk to the customer and say, hey, we can see we're building something you do not need. Could we please scrap it and have an innovation workshop where we try to find out what is it you really need and build a new backlog. What you really need, you cannot go to the customer, just say, we are building the wrong thing, we should stop. You need some valve or some option, because they have invested a lot of money at this point. We have also have workshops where we have gone to a customer, a good customer we have, and said, hey, let's do a workshop working on what is your problems, and then try to find the idea of it. Find some solutions for it. So we worked on this hierarchy of, this hierarchy of abstractions, where we see, which is what we normally work on when you do innovation. You start at the top, at the vision, not the full top, but upwards, and then you work down to a concrete idea or product. And that was what we did for the Innovation Day 2, where we put in the challenges as a vision for something to have a solution for and work down. We did not ask the customer to do that. We asked the customer to come with problems, and then we will work up and see solutions and possibilities and a vision for a solution, and then we'll make a concrete solution. The intention here is not to have this once. This is what we like to do with customers over time. So every half a year or something like that, we want to repeat this. And then we can take out either output from the old one where you have the possibilities and work with them. We can take a new set of problems and do the same stuff again. Or we can take the output from the first innovation day with the customer and refine it. So we have the customer, the real product owner, close when we are doing this, because we are doing it together with him as a service. And it is a service, because we do not assume that we get something from ourselves here. Of course, if we are lucky, the customer finds a software he wants to create, and we can help him. But in worst case, he could also find a solution where he starts to work on how to get systematic out. And then it's going to be hard facilitation, I guarantee you. So, in a sense, you can also think that our sales guys, they're drooling about this. Because you have the customer here inventing his own problems and solutions in our presence. But that is not the primary intention. But it does make the sales guy very interested, to be sure. The primary focus here is that we want to do innovation where the customer is closed. So we can retreat process all these kinds of things I talk about. Now, the second day, now I have to see what time is. The second innovation, or third innovation day is something we are going to plan this autumn. And we don't have that much of a planning yet. We just want to, the only thing we really know we want to do with the innovation is to invite the customer in. And we probably would do something like the customer-driven innovation, but inside systematic. And have the customer use the resources of the various projects if he wants and needs to do the innovation. And of course use our facilitation corps, or core if you want to use that word, to help doing the facilitation. So we want the customer involvement. So very short, final thing is we have some very specific takeaways I hope you can use if you want to do something like this. One, I can't stress, and it's very, very abstract, but I think and believe that innovation is important, especially as the areas of calm waters are shrinking. And you need space to navigate, and you need to find ways to navigate into the rough waters. We have also discovered, and no surprise, that innovation is difficult. It's difficult both to energize people to come with ideas. It's difficult to capture the ideas. It's difficult to execute in the sense that it's very difficult to have management doing it. And believe me, the first time when we had done the first innovation day, we looked at each other and said, whew, we were naive. It takes iterations. You should also be sure that you have the necessary commitment from management, because in the end, regardless of anything else, the management are going to be the consumers of what they output. They need to either take the ideas into product lines, which we also have, or they need to take the ideas to the customer. But you need to have the management involved, and they need to see their benefit in it, which is one of the nice things about the customer-driven innovation, where at least the management in the sales department are drooling. I can't stress enough to have trained facilitators. Trained facilitation is mandatory. If you don't have them, people will not progress. And I have not talked about what that is in a sense, because that's a whole other talk to talk about facilitation. It's not just the retrospective facilitation, as I think many of you think about. It's a lot more about abstraction levels and working with abstraction levels. And as I said, lastly, be sure to have the real sponsors. If you're doing product lines, you need to have the managers of the product lines present. If you're doing software for external customers, be sure to have the customers involved. Any questions? Comments, please?
You said you found out you needed trained facilitators.
Yeah.
Is it some just general trained facilitators, or did you find out you needed some special training regarding innovation process?
You need, at least you need facilitation on the basic level, but you really need people who understand how to do facilitation in the sense of opening questions, do brainstorms, and explore an idea and close it again, and then take iterations on that. But you also need people who in a sense is able to work, who is able to work in the abstraction levels. Because one pitfall of all facilitation is this kind is you go too fast to the solution. So, and that's why the facilitator is so important, that is able to hold back and say, oh, we need to have the vision correct before we proceed. And we need to have the principal solution correct before we proceed. And that is really why you need a trained facilitator, or you will go into that pitfall.
So, as someone who works in education, is there something whenever I hear talks about innovation, I'm always wondering, so is there a message about what we should be teaching our students to make them better innovators? I mean, the future software developers. I don't know if you have maybe where you've gotten to now, you have some things that you wish you had learned during your university studies, or whatever. So, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, last week actually, I had a workshop, an innovation workshop with some students from mainly Aalborg University, and we invited people who were interested in innovation, and many of these students had courses about doing workshops and doing innovation. And that was really nice and interesting, because when I facilitate people who's not trained, they do not know what is going to happen now and what is the ideas. But these guys who was trained and done it again and again, working in groups, and they knew some of these techniques. They did not know this abstraction level. That was my contribution, in a sense, to control that. But I could say, go do this. Do an interview role play with this imagined customer, and they just say, hey, okay, I know what it is. So yes, I think that would be is a very nice skill to have, to be honest, really. Because we are learning it the hard way. It would be nice to have it if we could get people who knew it from start.
If you could run one of these innovation days anytime you want, how often would you have them?
I don't think it would be a good idea to have it more than every 4 months or something. Basically because people will be tired. You have to have a kind of newness, and they have to learn between. I think the important part, you need them often if you don't have normal workshops in between. If you have different workshops where you can train these facilitation and use what you have learned, then it's nice. 4 months, 6 months, I think is optimal. More than 6 months, you start to kind of forget.
The teams you assembled people into during the workshops, were they cross-functional, or were they only engineers?
Yes. Yeah, that was actually something I should have taken, as I had the time for it. When you do this, it's very, very important that you have different people, both in terms of how they are in personality. You need the entrepreneur, and you need the guy who want to integrate everything. You need the guy who would like to solve the problem, and a whole bunch of other guys that has different abilities. You need those together. That's one way of it. But you also need people from the cross-functional. We actually set up a special team or tried to have people from our legal services in all projects, because the legal service people knew all this kind of weird stuff about how to use things and what could you sell and what couldn't you sell. And also people in our people and culture, human resource group, had another view of things. So they could put in interesting views and things. Actually, on the second day, we had a team which did not know anything about the domain they were put into, but they still came up with good ideas, just working one day and thinking about it. But different kind of people is a very good idea. If you take it to the other extreme and say you take people, pure developers, same personality group, put on a rigid process, you know what you get every time. And that's not what you're interested in when you're doing innovation. You want to have different solutions.
I might possibly be able to elaborate on some of the things, as I'm working for a company that does facilitation of innovation. And so regarding the first question that was about whether you need some special education or something for that, that's really true. When we do innovation facilitation, there is a special toolbox with methods for several stages that innovative ideas are in, that support the different needs you have at different times for different ideas. And regarding the question of the variety of personnel involved, that's really true. You will want to have as much variance in the people involved into the process as you can have, because this generates the most of different ideas, and you definitely want that. And well, as for the part of seeking help for innovation facilitation, that's certainly true. That's why we're offering these services, and it's certainly a good idea to have, and it's a real ongoing process that should span a lot of time.
And that's also why, in a sense, we have external people coming to train our facilitators. We cannot train ourselves. We need external people for that. But we do also train our internal, and that's sorry to say, but we do also train our internal people because we need it in our everyday work. Basically, when you have meetings, you have either planning meetings or you have workshops. And when you have a workshop and you just have 5 people in an hour or something, it starts to be beneficial to have a facilitator on it. So it's a very good thing to have in a company and can ask for this pool of facilitators. You get a lot better solution and it's more cost effective.
So has this innovation process led to any products for Systematic?
It's actually led to one. But as I said, that was not the important. It turned out that was not the important thing. But what we can feel now, in the last year or so, you really feel it. You really feel our efficiency in workshops is increasing, and we have this customer-driven innovation. So we have a culture change. You can really feel it in Systematic. This, I think it's the willingness to think outside the box, not going into a meeting and just do closing and risk management and risk reduction, but say, okay, let's just think broad and then do it. That's quite a big culture change.
All right. Thank you, Karsten.